everyone, Jake here. In this video, I'll be restoring this mid-1990s Range Rover center console. As you can see, this center console has seen better days. The substrate is delaminating, and I don't know if this was left out in a junkyard in the weather or what, but when it came to me, you can see it's seen much better days. The finish is flaking off. There's pieces of the walnut burl veneer that are missing, and just overall it's in some really rough shape. So the first thing I'll be doing is putting some epoxy in the substrate and getting that locked down. Just took a minute here to remove all the mounting clips so that they're not in the way during the restoration process. For this project, I'll be using West Systems marine grade epoxy. After applying the epoxy down deep into the substrate as possible, I wrapped it in some saran wrap just to keep the squeeze out from getting all over the place in the vacuum bag. And I left this overnight for the epoxy to cure and pulled it out in the morning. The next step was to remove the old flaking finish and the walnut veneer. There was no real sense in trying to save the veneer because there was just too much of it missing and it was just too damaged. Where there was some damage on the top, I made these dams out of tape and added some epoxy to fill in the missing chunks on the top. With the epoxy all sanded down, it's looking pretty good, but there's still just a few little holes in areas that I'm not really happy with, and I don't want them showing through the new veneer. So I took some Bondo and filled in those areas. Now with it all sanded down, it's time for the new veneer. This stuff is about as crispy as a potato chip, and it breaks really easy. So the first step in doing this veneer is to condition it. For the veneer conditioner, I'm just using this homemade recipe. After applying the conditioner, I let it sit for about a day, and then I took it out and put it in the vacuum press to dry it out. With the veneer much more subtle now, I can cut it out and glue it down to the substrate. For gluing it down, I used the West Systems epoxy again. And back into the vacuum bag it goes for the epoxy to cure. After the vacuum press, you can see that some of the epoxy has bled through the cracks in the burl. So I sanded all that down, and then I gave it an epoxy coat on the top of the burl. After that epoxy cured, I began the tedious process of cutting out all of these holes in the console and trimming up the edges. Finally, with that all done, I began the sanding process and getting this thing ready for finishing. I could, I'd use the power sander on the flat areas, but because of the curve in this console, it made it really difficult to use that without causing issues to the burls, so this had to have a lot of hand sanding done to it as well. For this project, I'll be using a Total Boat varnish. It's a spar varnish, so it has good UV protection because being a center console, it's probably going to get some sun on it. And I began by filtering the varnish to make sure that there were no particulates in it. So for the finishing, I applied the finish a couple of times and then I would sand it, apply more finish, and I did this, I can't even count how many times. I stopped counting at 14. I know I did several more coats after that, but I wanted to build up a really thick varnish finish on this, and it took many days because you can only sand it so often. So you'd put a coat on, wait a few days, sand it, put another coat on, wait a few more days and sand it, and it just was a very long process to get through putting all of the finish on this. So I didn't show all of the finishing that I did. It's just, rinse and repeat, so pretty boring, but you get the idea. After putting all the coats of finish on it, I worked through a progression of sandpaper grits, starting at, I believe, 220 grit and working up from 400 to 600 and ending up at 800 grit sandpaper. After doing the dry sanding, I moved into the polishing process, and for that I started with a really high grit, 2000 grit sandpaper with water to start polishing it out, and ultimately went to an automotive buffing compound to do the final finish. After the top was all done and polished, I taped it all off so that I could paint the bottom of the console. And there it is, all done. I think it turned out pretty well, especially considering how it was when I started on it. Thanks for watching.